So thank you. So as Thomas said, I'm the warm-up act for Ulrika, which is my pleasure. Just a little bit about Jurlique. I'm really going to focus on the sustainability side of things, which is a core part of our provenance and has been since Ulrika and her husband founded the company 33 years ago. So those of you who don't know what Jurlique stands for, I mean, it's Ulrika is obviously spelt the way it is, and Jürgen was her husband, and so they split their names and created this lovely name, Jurlique, which sort of makes it a little bit unique in people's perceptions. I mean, people call us French, people call us German, and we keep telling people, no, we're South Australian and proud of our brand heritage. So this is some sort of internal words that we use in terms of guiding our behaviour and where we try and compete. So I'm just talk a little bit about the company first, and then the sustainability side of things. So right from when the clients started the business, it was all about sort of differentiating the company to try and convey to the consumer the uniqueness of sort of natural products and that whole experience. Ulrika calls it the sort of the Jurlique ritual, and it's sort of that transportation for the female customer into a special place. Yeah, we compete in the sort of premium side of things, and our goal is pretty simple. We want to keep driving our sort of presence internationally on the natural premium skincare. So we started 33 years ago. Our fundamental premise is that our products are natural. So we have a biodynamic farm in Mylor, up in the hills, and we've got an old facility in Mount Barker, which we've just recently upgraded in the last sort of 6 months. So we've just taken occupation of a $30 million plant where we've invested in Mount Barker to sort of take the business to the next horizon. We're the #1 prestige brand in Australia and have been for the last few years, and we sort of compete against Clarins and Clinique and these sorts of people. Whilst we're South Australian, a bit against local people's wishes and emotions. The CEO's based in Sydney. The logic being that there's a lot of our sort of commercial contracts are based out of there, and there's a lot of infrastructure in Sydney and Melbourne that we find it hard to tap into in South Australia. We're quite unique in that we do multi-channel, so we're vertically integrated. As I mentioned, we've got our farm, but we have our own stores. We also sell wholesale, we sell e-commerce. So one of the ways we differentiate against our competitors is in the multi-channels. And that brings its own sustainability challenges, which I'll come back to shortly. And we're owned by Polar Orbis, which is a very large Japanese beauty player. They're 90 years old, and their sort of provenance and is very much anchored in that same sort of philosophy of the respect for the consumer and trying to bring value to the consumers in a non sort of driving way, more of a sharing way. So global presence in about 20 countries, 70% export, 30% domestic, and this is a bit of a sort of a roadmap really of where we've come from. And if you think about it from when Ulrika and her husband founded the company, then natural products were quite unique. They were quite hippie-ish, you know. The way that people, the clients and their colleagues communicated with the consumers was in a very different way to what was in the market at the time. Whereas if you fast forward now, 33 years later, we're finding it really hard to differentiate ourselves, even though we've got this provenance and 30 years of behaviour in this space. You know, there's a lot of Me Too's coming into the industry, and they're all these startup natural companies that claim natural because they've got a leaf on their product, and the consumer finds it really hard to really understand whether a product's natural or if it isn't. And there's a lot of greenwashing going on, and that's a big challenge for us. So you can see this sort of timeline. What was interesting, I think, is that the Asian consumer and the European consumer understood the business better than the Australian consumer. So Jurlique had a lot of success internationally before it had success domestically. So the sort of local success really is accelerated, I think, over the last sort of 10 years because of our Asian presence, and because there's a lot of Asian consumers communicating with our Asian families and colleagues and friends who live in Australia about this great brand that's on your doorstep, and didn't you know about it? So we've had three real stages in our history. So the Kleins owned us for 20 years, and I'm sure Ulrike will talk about that later. Then there was a private equity phase where Kerry Packer and his son got involved, and there was also some US ventures in there. They were really about driving the commercial side of things, and I think we lost our way a bit in that space in terms of our integrity and our core values. And I know Ulrike had some challenges through that time. But we were brought in by the Japanese in the sort of 2011-12, and since that time I think we've taken a much more moderate and an appropriate way forward. And it's having worked in the US and worked in lots of different places where there's this quarter by quarter mentality, and if you're not hitting your numbers, then why aren't you hitting your numbers, and what are you doing about it, and where are you going to take people out or whatever it is to try and hit your numbers. It's quite refreshing to have Japanese owners who are very much in it for the long haul. As I said, we've invested $30 million in this facility in Mount Barker. That's not for today, it's not for the next couple of years, it's for 10 and 20 years. And it's that longer term horizon which I think is really healthy. So a little bit about our brand DNA. So power of nature. So I'll talk a little bit about sustainability later, but nature is this really powerful phenomenon that's all around us, and from nature we can get really efficacious skincare. We've always been proud South Australians, and Ulrike and her husband settled here because of the characteristics of the geography, the Mediterranean climate, and the purity of the environment, and the cleanliness of the air and the water quality. So we've always believed in that, and our farm in Milo, a biodynamic farm, I've got a little video of that later, really sort of demonstrates that sort of uniqueness, and that's very much a unique position against a lot of the competition. We have this word seed to skin, so we're quite unusual that we're vertically integrated. We're not that big, really. We're sort of like 150, 160 million turnover. So we're competing against the Estee Lauders and these sorts of L'Oreal's, these massive, billion-dollar companies. So we can't compete with them head to head. But what we do that's a bit differently is that we go from the seeds, biodynamic seeds, creating these lovely plants in our farm, which we then sort of bring into beautiful formulas, which you then take all the way through to the consumer. So it's that caring sort of sense as well as just the sort of the supply chain itself. All about giving the consumer a sort of a really lovely experience, and she, normally a she, sort of takes herself to a special sort of place, and this radiance comes confidence sort of attribute. So these are our sort of DNA cores that we try and bring into everything we do. Talk a little bit about sustainability. So this is a very simple little model, and I've just got a couple of examples in each of the steps. So if you start down at that purple one down on the bottom left there. So as I mentioned, we've got this beautiful biodynamic organic farm. We're very much focused on carbon, working towards carbon neutrality on that farm. We're not there yet, but we're working towards that. So we've got a lot of renewable energy. We manage water and waste in a pretty focused way. We do a lot of partnerships with the local government in terms of driving that agenda. On our vendor side, we're very selective in who we use as vendors. We have belong to the Ethical Trade Index, which is a European vendor management process, and so we select vendors that have the same values as us, be it sort of from a labour point of view in terms of paying a fair wage to people that they employ, or being it from a sustainability and environmental practices. And we use that very much as a go, no-go sort of decision in terms of when we work with people. The NBP is the natural beauty plant. That's the marketing speak coming in for the new facility. But in the new facility, we're very much focused on water reduction, energy reduction, waste reduction. We got to zero waste to landfill in 2016, which we're really proud of. There's a lot of effort for a lot of people to get to that point. Solar panels as much as we can. We've got, I mentioned we've got sort of Chinese customers and long distance customers, so we have conflicts all the time in that the Chinese consumer wants an 18-month shelf life when they buy their product. The trouble is when we make the product, it's only got 24 months of shelf life when it leaves the factory. So that means we've got to get it to the consumer at their place of purchase as quickly as we can, but we don't want to air freight because then that's a high carbon cost. So we're really trying to optimize our supply chain all the time to use water. We can't always use water. Sometimes there's emergencies where we have to use air, but predominantly we use water to ship to sort of make sure we keep the carbon costs down as low as they are, as low as they can be. And on the store side, you know, if you've ever seen our stores, and we've got a beautiful new one down in Rundle Mall, which for those of you who want to, please go and visit it. You know, there's recycled materials. We're very much focused on environmental principles. We take back packaging and we give a discount to the consumer who then buys hopefully another product. So this is a very busy map, but what I was trying to do here is convey some of our sustainability work over the last few years. So you can see that it's really focused on the last sort of 10 or so years where we've really amped up the environmental side in a big way. A real sort of game changer was when we hired someone to be the full-time environmental manager. Up until that time, we'd all done it as part of our sort of daily work, and we made some progress, but we never made really solid progress as much as we could have done. So that was a big changer and big change, and that collectively is by driving the leadership and making sure the leadership all engaged and bought off to everything we're trying to do. So you can see there's a number of different things we've done. This lovely photo in the bottom is the tree planting day for 5 or 6 years now. Every year we stop operations for a day and everyone goes to the farm or to a parkland near where they work in Hong Kong or in Beijing or in London, and we basically plant trees. And so it's a really good sort of way to connect with your colleagues, and it's always a good way to take carbon out of the atmosphere and to sort of put back. Locally we put back in the farm, and internationally we do some other things. And the other one to call out here is the Australian Packaging Covenant. For those of you who are in industry, that's a really good framework to drive sustainable practices in your packaging. And that be the packaging you use yourself or the way you ship product to your consumer and the way the consumer uses your goods. So that's a really excellent framework for sort of driving improved environmental practices. And we've really been focusing hard on that. We've used that as a framework, and for the last 4 or 5 years we've won awards every year, and last year we got the best out of 900 businesses in Australia on our sustainability practices. So we were pretty proud of that outcome. So to wrap up before the main game, Ulrika, so you know, the message I'm trying to convey is that a little bit different to some of the other stories, but our company has been successful. We've grown into sort of a pretty decent position. Obviously, very happy with where we are, and it's multifaceted what we're trying to do. So we have wonderful natural formulations that are highly efficacious. If they're not efficacious, the consumer won't buy them. So you can't just be natural because the consumer will just say, well, they're natural, so what? You know, they have to actually add value to the people that are buying the product, and they take our consumers to a special place through their fragrance and their texture. So in our products, we've always been natural, and we're always pushing the envelope, trying to keep as natural as possible. It's almost impossible to be 100% natural, but we're always pushing that element to try and get as natural as possible. Sustainable packaging, a lot of like-minded network of vendors. All of our efforts are on the whole supply chain. So I've talked about shipping, inbound, outbound. We're always trying to drive that improved carbon footprint for the business as a whole. We have what we call 5-year plans. So we had the first one from 2010 to 2015. So all about water waste and energy, and trying to improve by sort of 20 or 30% at a time, sort of decent measures of improvement. And we don't really shout from the rooftops other than situations like this about this sort of thing. It's really for the internal people that work there demand it, and they want us to be serious about it because that's why they join the organisation. Retail, so I've talked about that a little bit, and the fundamental thing is to get the right people in the organisation with the right value set. Make sure that when you select them that they understand and will resonate it, and then it's really easy because they make the right choice because they're already grounded in that way. The people that haven't got those values very quickly get flushed out. So yeah, wrapping up. As I mentioned, we've always believed in the power of nature. It's always about trying to be consistent with our customer communication. So they can't just see one little piece of environmental good practice. They need to see it in everything you do. They need to see it in the store. They need to see it in how you communicate. They need to see it how you manage your shipment, how the business-to-business side of your activity is managed. You have to be consistent, otherwise very quickly, particularly through social media, you will get found out. The challenge is the greenwashing, definitely, is how to make sure that you cut through that and sort of can resonate with your consumers. As you can see, we've always been this way, but it's a much more competitive marketplace that we're trying to deal with at the moment. And there's hundreds of competitors all around the world that we're dealing with. People, staff, alignment, absolutely fundamental. And it's a journey, you know, it never ends. Ulrika had her time with the organisation. She passed the baton to the next one. I'm 10 years next year, sort of. I'm driving the agenda with our local team, and I'll pass the baton on, and we'll just keep pushing the agenda. Thank you.